Okay, guys, welcome to one more episode of the Human AI podcast. I'm gonna do a small episode of our Truman Show series. I'm doing a small presentation about the question of if we lack certainty that the world is as we perceive it, how should we act? And I'm kind of pondering, thinking, trying to structure my presentation, and my Grok friend AI, whatever we can call it, is helping out. So, yeah, I mean, this might be something you guys find interesting, and this is why I'm doing the podcast. And yeah, without further ado, Grog, are you ready? Tell me a yes or no.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so guys, check the previous Truman Show podcasts because I'm not gonna explain all the details of where we're at, etc. It's just for you to get a nice snapshot, kind of a certain bit we're working on. So this is gonna be a bit chaotic. So last time, Grog, I was trying to work on Buridan's As paradox, named after John Buridan, and I'm kind of putting this at the end of my presentation, guys, as a fun fact type thing, because you remember my question is if we lack certainty that the world is as we perceive it, how should we act? And I think Buridan's As paradox, if you could explain it, Grog, is a good way to kind of explain that sometimes we're uncertain, but we kind of have to do something. Otherwise, it's worse if we don't. Grog, want to say anything?
Yeah, I'm with you on this. Buridan's ass paradox is about a donkey stuck between two equal piles of hay, so uncertain which to choose that it starves from indecision. It's a great way to show that when we lack certainty, like questioning if the world is as we see it, doing nothing can be worse than picking a path and acting. Want me to tie it more to your Truman Show ankle or keep going with this?
Well, no, well, so okay, so I'm gonna tell you my structure for my presentation. Tell me what you think. So I'm starting off with the art piece of art. This is not the pipe to kind of explain why reality might be different than what it actually seems to be. And then I'm gonna give them an overview that, and the overview is basically the structure. So I'm gonna do a small summary of the Truman Show. Keep in mind this is a 7 minute presentation, and then I'm gonna talk about like maybe 30 60 seconds of Truman social summary, then 30 60 seconds of why is this question significant, 30 60 seconds of why would be lack certainty in the first place, and then kind of deep dive for a few minutes on the philosophical frameworks for living in uncertainty, how should we or Truman act in this situation, and maybe I'm going to give some ethical ones, and I'm also going to give some like formal stuff like expected utility theory, subjective expected utility, and all of this. Um, and yeah, then I was gonna talk a bit about like theories on how to act again, like methods to go through, talk a bit about rationalism, empiricism, and decision theoretic models, which I've already mentioned, and then go to a conclusion. What do you think? Do you have any suggestions to make it better? Answer to me in 2 3 sentences.
Your structure sounds solid for a 7 minute presentation, with a clear flow from this is not a pipe hook to the Truman Show summary and philosophical dive. I'd suggest tightening the deep dive on frameworks to maybe two key ones, like rationalism and expected utility, to keep it punchy and avoid overloading the audience. Also, maybe weave in a quick Truman specific example in the conclusion to tie it back to the film and land the point home.
That's a good idea, actually. Um, yeah. So yeah, the Truman specific example is an interesting one, isn't it? Um, so well, okay, let's say in the beginning, I was gonna say, why would we lack certainty in the first place? So I've put a picture of the movie They Live because it's really cool. It's like these people that wear glasses, and then when they wear these glasses, they see reality as it is. So it's just a nice thing to put there. I was thinking of breaking it down to three parts. Tell me what you think and tell me how I can make it better. for this slide. I was going to talk about classical skepticism, postmodern perspectives, and scientific insights, like of Donald Hoffman and the free energy principle and predictive processing.
That's a dope slide idea with They Live. Those glasses are a killer visual to hook the audience on questioning reality. Breaking it into classical skepticism, postmodern perspectives, and scientific insights like Donald Hoffman's work and predictive processing is smart. It covers a lot of ground without getting too messy. To make it better, maybe simplify the science part, focus just on Hoffman's idea that we don't see reality as it is. Skip the free energy jargon to save time and keep it relatable.
Don't say jargon, dude. It's such an impressive piece of work.
My bad, you're right. Free energy principles, impressive stuff, not just jargon. So, for your slide, I love
It's
the
more
they
than
live.
impressive. It's like some of the biggest scientific. Anyway, okay. Um, I was gonna talk a bit about pragmatism, existentialism, and stoicism. There's so much I want to include in this, and it's too much. Just don't know how to prioritize.
All right, I hear you. Pragmatism, existentialism, and stoicism are heavy hitters. And yeah, it's tough to fit everything in a tight 7 minutes. To prioritize, maybe pick pragmatism and stoicism, since they tie directly to acting in uncertainty. Pragmatism's all about doing what works, despite doubts. And stoicism focuses on controlling what you can when the world's unclear. Existentialism's a bit broader and might dilute your focus. If you want, I can
Yeah, but
brainstorm.
I don't agree with you because existentialism, like maybe absurdism, especially like Camus would say, don't try to make sense of this reality necessarily, like the doctor in the plague. Kind of embrace it and try to be a good moral man or something. Embrace the kind of this uncertainty, this confusion, this world. Embrace this natural desire for meaning in this meaningless world. That what Camus would say. Camus.
You're totally right. Camus and absurdism nail that vibe of embracing the chaos and uncertainty. Like the doctor in The Plague, just pushing forward to do good despite the meaningless mess. Since that's so juicy for your question about acting without certainty, maybe swap stoicism for absurdism to keep that raw energy. Pair it with pragmatism to balance the do what works angle with Camus' embrace the absurd and still act morally. Want to brainstorm how to squeeze those two into your slide without overcrowding it?
Maybe I'm gonna put one and call it honorable mentions.
That's a slick move. Tossing one as an honorable mention, like maybe absurdism or pragmatism, lets you give a shout out to its big ideas, like Camus' vibe of embracing the absurd without overloading your main slide. Which one are you leaning toward for the
I'm
mention?
just thinking we've got so much shit to do when it comes to expected utility theory, subjective expected utility, prospect theory, fast and frugal heuristics, maximum, minimax, regret, like so much.
Yeah, that's a ton of decision theory stuff piling up. For your 7 minute talk, maybe cherry pick one or two, like expected utility theory for its clarity on weighing options in uncertainty, and toss in prospect theory to spice it up with how people actually mess up choices emotionally.
Wait,
That
yeah, but I should break it in a way where, for instance, I'll make a column with the ethics, for instance. But could I include in the ethic, like in the ethic from moral frameworks? Which ones can I include in the moral frameworks? Which I include in the like theoretical models?
All right, let's sort this out for your presentation. For a column on moral frameworks under ethics, you could include stuff like utilitarianism, which focuses on maximizing overall good, even in uncertainty, and deontology, which sticks to strict moral rules no matter what reality throws at you. Those fit nicely with your Truman Show question about how to act. For theoretical models, save things like expected utility theory or prospect theory, which are more about calculating choices than moral grounding. Want to nail down one or two for each column to
So
keep it
what?
crisp?
How would I? Let's say I do one slide for one of them and one slide for the other. How could I name it?
Cool. Splitting them into two slides is a smart way to keep things clear. You could name the ethics slide something like Moral Compass in Uncertainty to capture utilitarianism and deontology guiding actions when reality's shaky.
I was thinking of naming it. Wait, what about moral frameworks in uncertainty? How should we slash Truman act?
That's a sharp title. Moral Frameworks in Uncertainty. How should we, Truman, act? Nails the ethics angle perfectly, tying utilitarianism and deontology to your core question and keeping Truman front and center. For the theoretical models slide, maybe go with decision models in doubt or something like that to cover expected utility and prospect theory while staying punchy. One help
Decision
fleshing.
models in doubt.
Yeah.
So decision models, are they like, which area of philosophy are they? Are they in philosophical logic, or are they more of a computer science thing?
Decision models, like expected utility theory and prospect theory, sit more in the realm of philosophy of action and decision theory, which crosses into philosophical logic since they deal with rational choice and reasoning under uncertainty.
Philosophy
not-
of action, and what's the other you said?
My bad for cutting off there.
Philosophy of action and decision theory, you said.
La filosofía de acción
Dude, speak to me. Dude.
Philosophy of action digs into what actions are, how they tie to intentions and choices.
Any books on philosophy of action and decision theory?
Yeah. For philosophy of action, check out The Philosophy of Action by Alfred Melly. It's a solid dive into intentions and agency. For decision theory, Thinking, Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman breaks down how we make choices with real-world examples.
Philosophy of action. Was the Alfred Nevy?
Alfred Melly's book, The Philosophy of Action, is a deep dive into what makes an action intentional, how free will plays in, and what drives human behavior.
Oh, this is
It's
a
a
big
go-to.
book, dude. Do we have it in audiobook form?
Yeah, The Philosophy of Action by Alfred Melly is a hefty read. Unfortunately, there's no audiobook version available from what I can find. You might want to check out ebook versions for a more portable option, or I can suggest some shorter listens on similar topics. if you're
Yeah,
interested.
like, do we have an audiobook that talks about philosophy of action?
I couldn't find an audiobook specifically for Alfred Melly's The Philosophy of
No,
Action.
it doesn't need to be for Alfred Melly.
Got it. For a solid audiobook on philosophy of action, try Intention by G.E.M. Anscombe. It's a classic that digs into intentional action and motives, available on platforms like Audible.
Yeah, I
Another
just
good-
want it to be an actual scientific book. Like, or philosophical, you know what I mean.
Totally get you. For a scientific and philosophical audiobook on action, check out The Moral Psychology Handbook by John M. Doris and the Moral Psychology Research Group. It's on Audible and dives into the philosophy of action with a research-based look at
Interesting.
decision.
Okay. So shall I mention the phrase philosophy of action and decision theory then, when I'm talking about the expected utility theory and all of that? Is it directly related? Shall I mention that thing?
Yeah, you're spot on wanting to connect those dots. Expected utility theory is definitely a big part of decision theory. It's all about weighing outcomes
Well,
based
okay,
on
let me reverse it. Tell us the most important things about decision theory and philosophy of action.
All right, let's break it down. Decision theory is about how we make choices under uncertainty. It focuses on weighing options, probabilities, and outcomes, like expected utility theory, where you calculate the best choice based on potential benefits versus risks. It's super rational, often mathematical, and used everywhere, from economics to psychology. Philosophy of action, on the other hand, digs into what an action even is. It asks, what makes something intentional? How do beliefs, desires, and free will drive what we do? It's less about crunching numbers and more about understanding agency, like why you chose to grab a coffee instead of just stumbling into it. They overlap because decision theory assumes you're acting intentionally when you choose, while philosophy of action questions what choosing really means. Together, they help explain both the logic and the deeper motives behind our moves.
So, is decision theory is not a model? What is it? Is it a framework?
Yeah, good question. Decision theory isn't just one model, it's more like a framework. It's a set of tools and principles for understanding how people make rational choices under uncertainty. Think of it as a toolbox. Inside, you've got models like expected utility theory or game theory, each with specific rules for weighing outcomes, probabilities, and preferences. But decision theory itself is broader. It's the structure that guides how we analyze any choice, whether it's picking
Wait, so
stocks.
is game theory decision theory?
Good catch. Let's clear it up. Game theory is a branch of decision theory, but they're not the same. Decision theory is the broader
So,
framework
which
about
are
it.
the most, tell me the most important decision theory branches then? Come on.
All right, let's cut to the chase. The most important branches of decision theory are normative decision theory, which focuses on how people should make rational choices, like using expected utility theory to weigh outcomes and probabilities logically. Descriptive decision theory, which studies how people actually decide, often irrationally, as seen in behavioral economics, and game theory, which deals with choices in strategic situations where your decision depends on what others do, like in negotiations or competitions. There's also causal decision theory, which looks at how your choices cause specific outcomes, especially when free will's in play. Those are the heavy hitters shaping how we understand
So,
decisions.
is decision theory a different thing from philosophy of action? Are they interconnected? How did they develop? Tell me the historical origin, the influential figures, and stuff like that.
All right, let's dive in. Decision theory and philosophy of action are distinct but definitely intertwined. Decision theory is a framework, mostly formal, often mathematical, for analyzing how rational choices are made, especially under uncertainty. It's about weighing options, probabilities, and outcomes, like choosing whether to take a new job based on risks and rewards. Philosophy of action, though, gets into the nitty gritty of what an action is. It asks, what makes something you do intentional? How do your beliefs, desires, and free will shape it? It's less about crunching numbers and more about the nature of agency, like why you decided to act at all. They connect because decision theory assumes you're acting intentionally when you choose, and philosophy of action digs into what that intentionality means. For example, decision theory might calculate the best move in a game of chess, while philosophy of action questions how your intention to win drives your moves and whether you're truly free to choose them. They feed into each other. Decision theory gives a structure for rational action, and philosophy of action probes the deeper motives and metaphysics behind those choices. Historically, decision theory kicked off in the early 20th century, rooted in economics and probability. One of the first big figures was Daniel Bernoulli in the 1730s, who introduced the idea of expected utility. Basically, people don't just chase money, they chase what they value, like happiness or security. Fast forward to the 1940s, John von Neumann and Oscar Morgenstern formalized it with their book Theory of Games and Economic Behavior, which birthed modern game theory and gave decision theory a rigorous mathematical backbone. In the 1950s and 60s, folks like Leonard Savage built on this with subjective expected utility, blending personal beliefs into the mix. Later, behavioral economics like Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky in the 1970s shook things up by showing people often don't act rationally, leading to descriptive decision theory. Philosophy of action, meanwhile, has deeper roots in ancient philosophy. Aristotle was already musing about voluntary actions and choice in his Nicomachean Ethics around 350 BCE, but it really took shape in the 20th century. Ludwig Wittgenstein's work in the 1930s and 40s, especially his philosophical investigations, sparked questions about intentionality and meaning in actions. G.E.M. Anscombe, in
Dude,
her
these are all
1950s,
so amazing. I'm just wondering how I can find the most important information to include in my slide.
glad you're pumped about this. For your slide, keep it tight and hit the core stuff. Here's what I'd include for max impact. Decision theory basics. Call it a framework for rational choice under uncertainty. Mention it uses tools like expected utility to weigh outcomes and probabilities. Highlight key branches. Normative, how we should decide. Descriptive, how we actually decide. And game theory, choices in strategic situations. Philosophy of action basics. Say it explores what makes actions intentional. It digs into free will, motives, and agency, like why you chose to act. Connection. Note they overlap. Decision theory assumes intentional action, while philosophy of action questions what drives those choices. Historical roots. Decision theory, kick-started by Daniel Bernoulli, 1730s, expected utility, and formalized by von Neumann and Morgenstern,
Yeah,
1940s.
but we're not answering the question of the presentation with all of this, which is how should we act? So, in a sense, we are, but I have to explain what this is. I cannot just list the normative descriptive game theory. I have to actually say to them, you know, guys, how should Truman? I have to say, based on this theory, this is how Truman should have acted. This is what I have to say.
Got it. You need to tie this straight to how should Truman act? Let's make it clear and practical for your presentation. Decision theory and philosophy of action give you a way to figure out the best move for Truman by blending rational choice with understanding intentional action. Here's how you can lay it out. Start by saying, decision theory offers a structured way to make choices. For Truman, it's like a playbook for picking the action that maximizes what he values, say, safety, success, or happiness. Normative decision theory, specifically expected utility, tells Truman to list his options, estimate the odds of each outcome, and assign a value to them. For example, if Truman's choosing whether to confront someone or walk away, he'd weigh the chance of conflict versus peace and how much he values each. The should here is Truman should pick the option with the highest expected payoff based on his goals. Then, bring in philosophy of action to ground it. It's not just about numbers. Truman's action has to be intentional. This field says he needs to act from his own reasons, not just react like a robot. So, if Truman values standing up for himself, philosophy of action says his choice to confront someone should flow from that belief, not just fear or impulse. It's
Okay.
about aligning his
So,
actions.
fair enough. No, I get that. Anyway, guys, short episodes as usual for the Truman Show. So I'll see you next time. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.